Good morning, everyone. This is Michael Connor with the Early Learning Division, and I want to welcome you to our June webinar for our Oregon Head Start Pre-Kindergarten Leadership. We've got a fantastic group for you that we've pre-recorded because we care about you. Some of us are in Long Beach, California right now, so we decided to record this in advance. So you're in the future, and we're coming at you from the past. Who else is on board with us? You all want to introduce yourselves?
Certainly. Good morning. This is Sean Rodriguez. I'm the Head Start Collaboration Director, and I am not in Long Beach, but I am getting ready to leave to out of the country the day after this webinar. So I took the opportunity to pre-record mine as well.
This is Lindsay Pearson, OPK specialist with Michael, and I will be in Long Beach, hopefully attending Michael's training there. So thank you for having me.
And this is Teresa Waite, preschool program analyst, and I am not getting to go to Long Beach, even though I love Long Beach. No resentment there. And but I will be in the office in case you need any technical assistance regarding the parts and pieces of the grant that are going to be coming together over the next couple of months.
Great. So Teresa, thanks everybody for being here. Teresa, you are up first.
Thank you, Michael. Well, this is going to be fairly quick, and I might not go in the exact order of what's on here because I didn't stop to think about the order of things at first. We will be sending out links for site and service workbooks for 2019 shortly. They're going to be different than last year because we're going to do a portal link, and everyone's going to enter their data into the same place. And I will be working with each of you so that you can view your data in your own separate reports so that everyone's not looking at your stuff. It'll be the same format for the data. It's just if we can bring it all together in one place, it makes some of our work easier and some of our data crunching easier. So more to come on that, but I will be putting a link into the portal after June 1st, which is tomorrow. Tomorrow my time. You guys are already past it. Monthly reports. I know that not all of you have children in service during the June month, but we are going to go ahead and have a monthly report open for data as of June 1. So those of you who have it, please go ahead and submit what you have so that we can get an idea of what children are in programs during the month of June. The grant timeline is that your grants are being worked on at this point in our procurement office, unless you do not have a funding request into us yet. And we are working on some of those still. So there are going to be some of you who are still pending. The good news is that the stuff that is being done with the grants right now will make it easier once we get the funding requests done. It will make it easier for those programs to just have their information dropped into those requests or into those grants so that we can roll those through quickly. And then the last bullet pointed thing I have is the Oregon Head Start Pre-K Program Expenditure EGMS bullet point. And I think, and you guys can send me awful emails if I'm wrong, but I think that I touched on this at the conference when I stopped by. Because more funding is coming in for our early learning programs, we're being asked to take on a higher level of I got to think of this word. Anyway, responsibility for where those funds are going. And one of the things we're being asked to do for a lot of our programs is to get a little more information when you submit an EGMS claim. I will have a little more detail for you, and I'm actually thinking I'm going to send this out and be able to talk to your people individually, but really it's going to to be a report that says, what are you claiming those dollars for? So if we get, as an example, if we get a $1,000 claim in EGIMS, there's an additional piece for your fiscal folks to do that just says maybe $100 of that went to personnel, $50 of it went to equipment, just those big, broad, high-level amounts. We don't want all the little details of what the money was spent on. But it's becoming more and more incumbent upon us to be keeping a closer eye on dollars for all of our programs. So this will be a work in progress for this first year as we get used to it and figure out the least onerous way of making this work for you guys and for us, because we don't really want to make a burden out of this. We're hoping that this is information that already went into the decision to make this claim be whatever dollar amount it is in the first place.
And Teresa, you're talking about sort of major budget categories, right?
Major budget categories, yes. So the ones, if you're looking at your budget workbooks, those are the ones that are like A, B, C, D, that high level, not the detail level that's underneath that. Thanks for asking that.
Some of our other ELD programs have been doing this for a while, not Head Start, but some of our other grantees.
So yes, so more to come on that. I will be sending out or posting links for that as well. And I expect that it'll be a really good opportunity to ask questions and let us know what's working and what's not, because this will be the first time. And as I said before, we don't want to turn this into another major thing you're doing. We're hopeful that it's just something that's already being done anyway. So you just pluck a few numbers in and it's done. And then the last thing that I will be putting up here every month is that the ODE OPK data collection should be opening by mid-June, which means any programs that have their data ready and still have staff on board can start entering their data for the annual data collection at that time instead of waiting till the crazy busy fall time to do it. The collection will still remain open until mid-September, however, so that everyone has an opportunity to find a time that works best for them. There are no major changes to the data collection this year, except that I believe, as you might have noticed on the equity survey that we did, there are questions about Gender X, and Gender X will most likely be showing up as an option on your OPK data collection for this year. If you have not collected the data in that way, that's perfectly fine. Just use what you have, but just be aware that that is something coming up across all ODE student level data collections. And I think that covers everything. Michael,
Thank you, Teresa. Although I don't believe you've covered the Cubs.
It goes without saying, they're in general doing very well this year. So I don't need to cover them. I just need to bask in the glow of fandom.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Teresa. Lindsay, you've got some stuff for us.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Because we're pre-recording, we don't get a chance to have any feedback from you guys, but I'm very interested in how folks have been using their one-time funds grants. I know a few people have gotten, upwards of maybe a new facilities truck or a new dishwasher, but I haven't gotten to hear about any other projects that folks have been using the money for that haven't really needed any special permission or come up for questions. So I'm interested to learn how creative people have gotten with that money. I wanted to check in. We've sent out a lot of surveys, and I apologize at the OHSA meeting for bombarding you guys as we are compounding our data collection. So I think that we have heard as of this morning at our PPI meeting that pretty much everybody has responded for the getting information to our PPI partners. So thank you all for that, because like I said, I know that we've been asking a lot of you guys. and wanted to make sure we checked in about the equity demographic survey. I know that folks have had some questions, and that is a program-wide survey. That has been the question that's come up the most. However, I think it would be beneficial for folks that if you are in a rural spot and you have demographics that change via your service areas, I think it would be really beneficial for you guys to check on that and look and see how the equity demographic information is different based on those locations. And then for the narrative questions, please use the results of your analysis to complete the narrative questions and use the link in the memo. If you do not have the memo, I did send accidentally 2 separate emails. So one of them came with the memo that had the link to everything, and then the second one came with the demographic information for your region. So if for some reason you're not able to find one or both of those emails, please email me and I'll get you the information immediately. But those are due in a month, so please make sure that that you get them in. And then the last thing that I wanted to just mention was I wanted to say a brief thank you to the folks in Eastern Oregon at Umatilla Moro and Eastern Oregon Head Start for hosting me and for having a conversation, a very deep and meaningful conversation about how programs are supporting children in trauma and with escalating behavior and supporting their families and supporting them in transitioning to kindergarten, as well as gaining access to all of the resources that they may need. And then how teachers are gaining access to resources, or how we're able to kind of come up with resources for teachers who are working really hard to keep these kiddos in their classrooms. And the main thing that we were kind of talking about that I would like everyone to think about is how we start to tell a different story. It seemed we all had some big reactions to the story that is out there that perceives Head Start as maybe transitioning kids out of Head Start. And we all know that that is not, that we're not kicking kids out of programs, but in fact that Head Start programs are working really hard to support all kids. And we know that there's quite a bit of intersection of challenge that comes in maintaining that, supporting teachers and children and families and staying in our programs. So I'm putting it out to you guys on how we can collect the appropriate data and how we can use that data to tell a really good story on how hard you guys are working to keep kiddos in programs. And then the last thing that I thought in kind of doing this that I was really excited about was Greater Oregon Behavioral Health has a data collection system that takes qualitative data and turns it into some finite numbers and into quantitative data that can tell a pretty strong story about what trauma looks like, at least for Eastern Oregon. So if anybody else has access to resources like that, please let me know. And that is all I've got. So thank you so much.
Oh, great. Thank you, Lindsay. Shauna, unless you really want to jump in, I can go. Hearing no.
Sorry, I was on mute. You're good.
Okay. So just to, I mean, I'm speaking to you from the past, so, you know, things could be different, but we're going to continue to ask you to plan for current service levels until we have better information. The legislature is still making final considerations around such important questions as expansion, duration, program improvements, and so forth. So we are not in a position to advise anything except plan for what we got. Typically, the legislature, in its wisdom, does include an inflation adjustment. Last time it was 3.7%. Don't know if that's going to happen. I think wise leadership will be teasing out multiple scenarios based on some likely possibilities. And I know that that's not easy to do with budget folks and finance folks. But that's the reality, is that we don't have any more information except to say our current advice is plan for current service levels, current funding levels, current slot levels, until we have better information. So there's that. Just a friendly reminder about the EGIMS shutdown that happens annually from about the 21st of July until about the 2nd of August. This is something that happens every year, so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. And you do have some time after the 2nd to make, sort of claims for the past. So it's not a you're not risking anything by not getting a claim in, but just know that we don't have access to it, so we can't approve claims. So work with your folks to get done what you need to do by the 18th or 19th, so that you've got a nice buffer and window, and you're not too worried about that. We did send out an announcement about that earlier this month. We'll send out another one soon, maybe today your time, as I'm speaking to you from the past. So I mentioned last week we're continuing to work with our partners at TS Gold to implement a limited item set for next year. It's very similar to the limited item set that we had for this year. The advantage is that the items that are not included would actually be excluded. That is, the teachers would not be filling out not observed or not applicable. You would not have to be running complicated data analysis filtering to filter out the bad data, and so on and so forth. We know that this, from a practical point of view, the system that we had this year was not optimal. It did give us some experience with having fewer items that you really had to observe and score on. But I think we all know that because the items were still appearing on the list, it wasn't a great solution. As you might remember, we had been told until August 11th that those items would be taken away, would be deleted from the teacher's dashboard or whatever. And then last year on August 11th, TS Gold told us that they could not do that. They weren't ready to do that. So we had to sort of make do for this year. But they are piloting a new limited item set. It's really quite similar to ours. There's really like 2 or 3 mild differences. Their crack research team has aligned it with the Head Start Early Learning Outcome Framework. So they feel confident that this meets the needs of Head Starts. And we're working hard to get that teed up and ready to go. There'll be a communication plan around that. And it's a little bit complicated for Aaron because as part of commitment to quality and Spark, we've offered non-Head Starts a chance to participate in our umbrella with TS Gold, which is cheaper. But that means that it's kind of shocking, but the majority of children on our umbrella in TS Gold are actually not ELD funded kiddos. They're out in the universe, folks who are just kind of jumping into our umbrella. We're also working to get Preschool Promise aligned with that. So if Preschool Promises are using TS Gold, that they would be under our umbrella and following our guidelines. So just stay tuned on that. I'm hoping to get some time with the education cluster to kind of dive into that a little bit more with ed folks. Not sure if that's going to happen, but that's our hope. So just stay tuned on that. And then last for me is we're working on, similar to how we have a TS Gold guidance document, we're working on a class guidance document for ELD programs on how we would recommend and suggest and offer resources around using class for program improvement. For the last 2 years, we've had a sentence in your grant that says you're going to use class for program improvement. And we've been starting to have more conversations with you about what that means, what's been working, what's effective, what do you struggle with, and so forth. So that's a big component of the extended duration pilot, is to find out more about how class can be used for program improvement. We have developed a data portal for class for all ELD programs that many of you have uploaded your data into. So we're working on a document that is more of a synthesis or a collection of resources and best practices and lessons learned to support you in using class for program improvement. And we're hoping that that helps to reorient the conversation around class to what its intended use is a tool to improve teacher-child interactions rather than it's being used primarily as a tool around sort of high-stakes monitoring. So that's our intention. And again, this is going to be a guidance document for all ELD programs. So if you're using class, here's how to use it well, and here's how to get your data in, and so forth. So that's our hope. We're working on it this summer. Stay tuned for that. We'll be sharing out a draft with that before it goes live, and have a communication plan. And that brings us to the fantastic Shauna. Shauna, what do you got?
Fantastic, Shauna. I will not argue that. We need to get a new picture though. My hair has not been that short for a very long time. So all of you, for time reference, we are recording this on Friday morning, and all of you are watching it on Wednesday. So I'm going to be referencing things I sent you yesterday, which is Thursday, for your reference point. So I just wanted to make sure, and really appreciate Michael and Lindsay giving me some time on the webinar to connect with you guys a little bit more around the work with childcare to let you guys know where that's at. One of the reasons I'm giving you this information now is because I will not be at the meeting later in June. I'm actually, in less than a week for me and tomorrow for all of you, getting on a plane to travel internationally and will not be back until the end of June. So I will be not missing that meeting, unfortunately. So I wanted to make sure you guys knew that all the information from our last, really, 2 or 3 meetings, we started in January talking more about things with licensing and childcare. And so all of those pieces that we've been discussing are in a better state of moving forward within the division. I've had 2 meetings now with Tammy and Dawn to kind of talk through the document that was previously made to capture all the information of the last work group that was done. And it's all tied up, but it's not all done. So it shows where everything, it has responses for everything, but some of those responses are explaining that things are still in flux or weren't finalized, et cetera, et cetera. Dawn and Tammy have been incredibly responsive and reaching out to their teams to make sure they get the most accurate, up-to-date information on what's happening with some of those pieces. They're also doing a crosswalk regarding the rules revisions and the input that was given and how that has or hasn't been incorporated as well. So this work is an ongoing piece. It's not something we could just do in 2 meetings. We have more meetings scheduled. We also have a plan to connect with directors who had volunteered at the January meeting, I think is when I got those names, that had volunteered, as well as some directors that Michael talked to Donna that she recommended to be part of this conversation. And so our hope is to have a call in probably July to touch base about what things are happening, what information we've gathered, provide with them some of the documents and forms of feedback we have to see if that kind of meets the needs of directors. And then in October, when you guys have your directors meeting, the plan is that both Dawn and Tammy will attend, but also that we will perhaps meet with that group of directors attached to that meeting to have a more in-depth conversation about next steps and where things are at and where they're going. So those things are in motion. If you have specific questions about specific pieces that were discussed, you can definitely reach out to me. I sent you guys the email that includes all of the contact information for the regional managers, because part of the conversation was to include them as like the step that you guys gather. You guys share information with questions and make sure that when there's clarification needed, that perhaps they can be a resource for you, as well as Tammy being a resource in those cases. When there's specific, and I have reached out to 1 or 2 directors, when there's specific cases that are occurring that you guys are concerned about, especially when it came to the child-on-child violence conversation, I would really appreciate you guys reaching out and giving me a little bit more detail around those conversations so we can tether out what the challenges are. I know that part of it for me is the learning that when I worked in child welfare in Louisiana, you only investigated parents and relative caregivers. You didn't actually research child care or Head Starts or other programs and allegations there. That was handled differently. And so it's a newer thing that they are doing these investigation pieces. So I'm learning more about how that plays out like in legislation in Oregon, what the requirements are and how that plays into some of the actions and decisions being made, and how we can make sure that it really still respects and honors the role of Head Start as serving the hardest children to serve and being able to maintain them and doing everything we can to keep kids safe, but still trying to work within their system some. So we're still working on those pieces, but especially those conversations as they come up, I would love it if you guys kept me abreast of the conversations, and so that I know where we have miscommunications and where we actually have systems pieces that we need to dive a little deeper on, which is what we're kind of tethering out and working on right now. So that's probably the biggest thing that I wanted to make sure you guys are aware of. You do have the email that I sent you yesterday that went into a little bit more detail regarding that. I did want to touch on the fact that for the Early Learning Council, we have an ad hoc that's looking at the Child Care Safety Portal, and there's a committee that's looking at that, and a lot of that conversation is what things need to be posted because of the Child Care Development Funds as a requirement of those funds, and what things are we doing because folks in Oregon need them. And this was a group that was put together at the directive of the governor to be able to look at things more closely. And so if you guys are interested, they do have child care providers and parents that are included in that group, as well as folks from law enforcement and other pieces that kind of fold into this work, and attorneys, et cetera. So if you guys have thoughts or inputs, you guys can make sure you let me know. Those are all public meetings, and so those documents and that information is available if you're interested in learning more about that. The other thing I want to touch base with you on is the yearly needs assessment that I'm completing. This, as you can all relate to because you all have similar grant, 5-year grant requirements. This is the final year of the 5-year grant for the Head Start Collaboration Office. And so it's kind of exciting that we're transitioning into kind of a new phase with what we're going to be submitting for this next year. So right now we're kind of wrapping things up, and I did par down the assessment as much as possible given what you guys are being asked for by the preschool development grant work, and also to make it easier because I know you guys are having a lot of surveys, a lot of things being given to you here in the recent past to gather information on. So we're trying to keep this light, but that also means that next year it needs to be heavier as we do the fuller, more in-depth in preparation for the 5-year grant, and things need to be more in-depth. And the preschool development grant information will be a wonderful asset to informing that. And one of the requirements is that the state does something more in-depth, as well as the collaboration office in preparation for that. So the TDG is perfectly aligned for us needing that 5-year information to inform the coming grant. So starting in January is when we'll be looking more in depth at those pieces, and I really hope to have you guys do more of in the conversation a little bit more. As you may know, the Early Learning Council is having some reconfigurations, and part of that is that previously it was the State Early Childhood Advisory Council as required by the Head Start Act and the funding that came from Head Start, and as such, things were configured a little differently. And as they're shifting the configuration of the council, they're shifting the Head Start component of that, not have that council be the ultimate advisory group, but to have that be at a different level. And so they're working right now in committees and kind of seeing where that fits in. And my hope is that as part of that shift, we can have more of Head Start be part of the conversation in a little bit more depth around things like the strategic plan and the needs assessment and what's happening in the 5-year grant period. So that is, and trying to integrate all that, of course, with the Raise Up Oregon and the other plans and expectations. So that's what we're looking at. My dream is to actually have individual meetings with all of you between January and April of next year to do an assessment that's more of an interview process to gather information versus you guys just filling something out online, and maybe just narrowing it down to the metrics I have to have, which is your relationship with certain entities and where you're at in that process that I have to report out on. That maybe some of those things will be an easy survey to mark, and most of the conversational pieces will actually happen in conversation as a way to gather some of that information. So we'll be in touch between now and then as we start to gear up and figure out those pieces to it. So those are the biggest things that I wanted to connect with you guys on, and make sure you had information. Feel free to connect with me if you're watching this Wednesday. It's my last day before I'm going to be out for about 3 weeks. And so I'll lower the prices, but I'll do my best to respond to you. I am requesting it because I am gone for such a long period, but if you have anything that's really pressing that you need to hear back before the end of June, that you actually put urgent in your subject line so that I can head out the emails that are really urgent, and most of them I'll be looking at the first week of July. Michael's volunteering for you to actually send every question to him. He will make up an answer for you, whether it's right or not. It's not important. You can get your questions answered easily by Michael because he's good like that. So
the answer is 4. The answer is 4.
I don't know 42. You're confusing me now.
42, right. It's
Yes.
42 is the meaning of the universe and Jackie Robinson's number. So
There you go. Good
thank you,
combination.
Shauna. Really appreciate it. Safe travels to you.
Thank you.
3 weeks. Holy cow. Okay. Just a little bit more then about our upcoming schedule. As we mentioned, we're going the specialists, Lindsay and I, are going to be in Long Beach next week. This week, we are in Long Beach. Wow, it's like time travel. And then we'll be in Wilsonville around the 19th through the 21st. Just a friendly reminder that the extended duration pilot, the last community of practice meeting, is on the morning of the 19th for those participating in the pilot. So looking forward to that. Preliminary findings from our research partners, a little bit more about the technical documents that we're going to get to you this summer, and so forth. And then finally, the Summer Institute, June 24 through 27 in Bend. Very excited. We have 25 participants for the Ambitious Instruction course. As I mentioned last time, most of those are Head Start teachers, but we have really nice representation from Preschool Promise, and we've got some dual funded folks too, so that's super cool. We're going to have a webinar for them coming up to get them oriented to the Coaching Companion tool, which is an online video feedback tool that we're going to be using as sort of the way to structure the course. But the 4 days of face-to-face work is in Bend, and then folks will be in a professional learning community for the following program year with monthly assignments and giving each other feedback on their teaching. And we're very excited that this is we're able to offer this opportunity and learn more about how we can support our highly capable teachers moving to awesomeness. And with that, I believe we have reached the end of this pre-recorded webinar. I pause for questions. No questions. Pre-recorded. See. Anyway, wishing you all happy trails, and really, Shauna, safe travels to you. And we'll see most of you in at the end of June, toward the end of June in Wilsonville. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks.